Alrighty, well, good afternoon. Scott Lang here with Visionary Philanthropic Consulting. Appreciate your time. We're going to have an exciting idea exchange this afternoon with my friend Lin Coughlin and each of you. This is going to be a participatory experience. I'd like to ask you to get your cell phones out and available. We're going to use the Slido technology, and we'll have some QR codes that'll display on the screen. You'll need to capture that so you can link directly into our session. And what I'd like to do is ask Lin to join us. Lin's got a lot of experience in the corporate world, serving as a senior executive herself, and then in recent years as a consultant in the area of change management, and C-suite counsel, actually with CEO executive counsel. And I'm pleased to announce that she leads our change management, organizational development section at the firm. I'm going to share my screen because we've got a few slides that we're going to want to review together. And we'll start from the beginning of the slide deck. Here we go. And little background on Lin. In addition to her professional work, she serves as a volunteer with the August organization known as C200. It's an invitation-only organization of women who manage a significant portfolio in a public company or have started a private enterprise with at least $25 million in sales. I think that's the number. But she's got a wealth of experience, and I'm so happy that she's joining us today. It's at this point that I'd like you to take your camera out and point it squarely at that QR code, because our next slide asks you a question, and that is whether or not you've initiated, completed a strategic plan that included significant change in an organization. It may not be the current one, it might be a previous organization, but that's good. So everybody who's responded, and that's the 5 of you to so far, has been involved in the process. That's terrific. Now, have you participated in a merger, restructuring, or downsizing? Lynn's also got some experience with that. Okay. You know, in the academic space, this is a little less common. In the healthcare space where I was, we were buying hospitals all the time and trying to incorporate different cultures from each and make them part of a single enterprise. That's the way MedStar Health grew up. And then lastly, are you a member of a senior leadership team? Are you part of the group that has to manage this process? And your options are yes, no, or I would like to be. Outstanding. Well, this helps inform our conversation this morning. And with that, I'm going to turn the session over to Lin, and I'll recede into the background and advance the slides as needed. Thanks so much, Lin.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I just want to build a little bit on what Scott had to say in terms of my role at Visionary. I've had the pleasure of working with Scott and his team members on a few assignments that have involved with not-for-profit organizations, of course, that have involved the consideration of very significant departures from the status quo, be it from a leadership standpoint, an organizational standpoint, or a strategy standpoint. So we are excited to have this opportunity to share our perspective with you and hear from you. A little bit about the landscape. This is information that you're probably aware of, but you know that women represent a significant portion of the workforce, but only hold about a third of the roles in senior leadership, and the numbers drop down even more significantly when you get into the C-suite. The number is more like 10 or 12%. Companies with women executives are 30% more likely to outperform other companies. This has been widely researched for many years. Shouldn't come as a surprise to you, but it's an important piece of context. And we are slowly but surely building the roster of Fortune 500 female CEOs at 10.5%. It grew at what for this group it was a fairly good pace last year, and the year before. The rate of increase seems to be increasing, but it's still very slow. Scott, you can go to the next one.
Yeah, and if anyone's got a question anytime along, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and Lynn will be happy to respond as we move through the slide deck, in addition to holding a Q&A at the end.
And if you have questions as I go, please feel free. And we'll address them as I go. Okay. Moving along, change management stats. 80% of organizations anticipating significant change in the next 3 years. This again is if you study this space at all, you'll see that significant disruptive departures from the status quo in organizations for profit and not for profit is really the norm. The average organization has undergone at least 5 enterprise-wide changes in the last 3 years, and most leaders expect that the pace at which change is happening will accelerate, and in fact it is. So a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, for profit and not for profit, going through big change, but most of those changes are not successful in terms of the performance that they achieve on a sustained basis, and in terms of changes in the culture that are achieved. And you can see John Kotter did some research at Harvard Business School, did some research and found that the 78% failure rate really does reinforce the fact that it is a very challenging undertaking to affect big disruptive change in organizational settings. Next slide, Scott. Now, of the 22% that were successful, that same research that John Kotter did showed that there were 6 attributes that set them apart. I'm not going to go through them in detail with you, except to emphasize that these were companies that had more women in managerial positions, and they were companies that where women made up a higher share of employees at those organizations. So we see that the impact that women have from a performance standpoint is important, is real and important. Next slide, Scott. And then finally, in 2019, Harvard Business Review conducted a research study that where they looked at the leadership competencies of male leaders and women leaders, and found that women outscored their male counterparts in 17 of the 19 leadership competencies, to include being champions of change. Now, I feel the differences between men and women in many cases were not necessarily all that significant, but I think the point that we're trying to make is that there is just so much change going on in organizations, and what's not and the leaders that are needed to affect them is very, very real, and leaders who know how to do it. And there just aren't a lot of women who have been tapped at this point in time to affect that change. So Scott, the next slide, let's talk a little bit about the skill sets that women leaders have that are most important to affecting successful enduring change, big enduring change. One is all around the theme of collaboration and being able to see around corners and forge partnerships in terms of a purpose and vision that are in support of a change. Women tend to do this with a fair amount of passion and authenticity, and in their own voice. They what's great about women as collaborators, and especially as it relates to change, is that when you're affecting change, the best way to do it is to appeal to your stakeholders' heart first, then to their head. And because it's really, usually when you're affecting change, you're dealing with a problem, and the better you can be at being able to isolate, talk about, socialize a problem and how it manifests itself, the more effective you're going to be when it comes time to selling the change into the organization. So women take a very inclusive approach, and then they're very holistic thinkers, or we are, I should say, very holistic thinkers. And when you are leading big disruptive change, it's not just about executing a strategy. You have to think about how the values of an organization might align, how its operating principles or its cultural norms might align, and the extent to which core competencies exist, especially at the senior and middle management levels, to affect the change. And so there's a lot of balls in the air at any one time that a change master is thinking about to lead and affect change. Next slide, Scott. And women are great relationship builders. They ascribe a lot of importance to communication, affiliation, and cooperation. And they put a lot of emphasis on the benefits to a strategy that can inure to the various stakeholders that are always affected. Women are very good at going, like I said, right to the hearts of people, and which almost always has to do with the fear of the unknown. Most people are averse to big change. And in an organizational setting, it has a lot to do with the security of their roles, their jobs, their advancement. And because women are such good relationship builders, they can impart a sense of possibility and achievability when when communicating with stakeholders about a big change. They know how to put themselves in the shoes of stakeholders, which is very important, very important. And that's the way you go about beginning to build a community of followers that can get their heads around the prospect of the change. And as I was saying, they are community builders, and this is a big, this point about passionate champions is a big kind of secret to the, it's part of the sauce that helps a lot when you're trying to affect a big disruptive change. And that is finding the people up, down, and across the organization, especially down and across, who want the change, who can get their heads around the change. Oftentimes, it's the people who are on the line working with customers or stakeholders every day who really know and understand and appreciate what kind of change needs to occur. And from the standpoint of a change master, you want to identify those people early on to help with the socialization of the change, its rationale, and how it's going to get done. And we call those people passionate champions. They also, in many cases, tend to be the people who can and will want to execute. Women are also very results oriented. They're used to being scrutinized as in organizational settings from a performance standpoint, and they are therefore very results oriented. They're laser focused. They tend to be laser focused on not only the success metrics, but the milestones that will get you to the achievement of a particular tactic or big strategy in support of a big disruptive change. They are not afraid to get their hands dirty, stay on top of execution. That said, though, they are also not afraid to back away and let the experts, the passionate champions who are executing, do their jobs and focus on coming in when obstacles occur, which they always do. Women tend to be decisive, and they are not afraid to and do very well with conflict resolution. And then we've got humility, being humble. Professional and intellectual humility is a 21st century leadership best practice, whether you're executing on a big change initiative or trying to advance the rationale for a big change initiative. This quality of humility has become very important when it comes to winning over the hearts and minds of people. And again, this is true of women. They get out in front to plan and launch, and then they get out of the way. They know when to let go and how to play the role of champion on the sidelines, jumping back in only when course correction is required, or if there are problems and obstacles that need to be cleared away. And they are humble enough to let go and let others be in the limelight insofar as executing is concerned. And then we have one more that is all around how impassioned women leaders are. Passion is really what drives one's ability to affect change. And women have become, in part because they're so results focused, in part because they're such collaborators and relationship builders, they get very impassioned and committed to continuous improvement, continuous change. And in putting this together, we were reminded of the Gandhi quote, which I'm sure many of you have seen before: "You must be the change you wish to see in the world. You must be the change you wish to see in the world." So those who have mastered the art of leading change really do personify that admonition, and hopefully that's helpful to you. So we have a couple of other questions. Now we're going to turn to a dialogue, hopefully, where we've got a couple of questions, but we'd very much like to hear from you. And to the extent that you have questions at all, we're happy to take them. But one question has to do with, for those of you who've been involved in the leadership of a big change initiative, what's worked best for you? What what are some of the secrets of success that any of you have learned as change masters? Would anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we got a couple people typing in here, and this is open text, so you can put down whatever your heart contends. Oh, here you go. Getting buy-in, and then listening and networking. What's your reaction to those two, Lynn?
Getting the buy-in from key stakeholders is absolutely, if you don't have that, you don't have an initiative to execute on. And it's the first and most important step. And it is absolutely critical. And you are spot on, the person who responded, to lead with this point. And getting the right stakeholders around the table is extremely important, especially stakeholders who are going to be on the fence, or who may not even may have a difficult time getting their heads around the change. You want them to feel as much ownership and accountability for actually for making the change, for executing the change, but also championing it. And
So
then
I've got a question. Typically, does organizational change occur as a result of strategic planning, where in fact you have surveyed, canvassed, got input from key leadership, as well as sort of a SWOT analysis of what the external forces are and you need to change? Or does change simply what we're doing right now isn't working and we need a new tactical direction?
it's both, Scott. It's really it's very situational. The first scenario that you described is absolutely one that gets deployed in terms of the research and the focus groups and that kind of thing, in a situation where you've come up with a hypothesis, for example, about a change to your business model that you might want to make, as an example. And you feel the need to, you really feel the need to affirm it or negate it. And so this research takes place. Oftentimes, the best research is the qualitative research. People do it quantitatively as well, but the qualitative research really gets you under the covers of what's really going on in the minds of people. And then in other situations, there are it's more obvious. The change that's needed is more obvious. And it could be, for example, a situation where someone or a leadership team has been in denial for a long time about a hard change that really does need to happen, but which everybody understandably acknowledges is not going to be fun to try to affect. And then someone else talked about listening and networking. So important, so important. It sort of goes along with how to get the buy-in, how to get the buy-in.
And that's, to me, sounds like several of the characteristics that you identified early on: the collaboration, the relationship building,
Right.
etc. All in denote a need to have listening capability and a network of people that can help the change master affect the change throughout the organization.
That's right. And, you know, my experience is that the most effective change masters are in fact very humble. They, they know what they know what they don't know. They're not afraid to to s- to step up to a situation where they might be overlooking a point, for example,
Mhm.
that is that they had originally thought was important to affecting the change, but frankly not as easy as they had thought, which often happens once you get into affecting change and you get into the actual execution and operational implications. It's often much harder, and you find that the navigation is much more complex, and leaders who are trying to affect change are very open to those kinds of challenges.
Well, I'm going to
So
flip to our next question, which is the exact opposite, which is when you've been involved in change management, what's been the biggest obstacle? I mean, what have those of you on the call um, observed as problematic or a challenge, a hurdle? Um, I hate to ask the question. I mean, we've been so focused on women, but Lynn, are there points at which men are the challenge? Are we a bit too
here's what I
cemented in
can
the way
say.
we do things, or is that just because I have German tendencies that are linear and sequential?
Well, if you think about it, Scott, that's a trick question, buddy. If you think about it seriously, the vast majority of leaders are men, right? They are. We learned that in the first few slides.
Right.
Men typically have a harder time with change than women do. There's a lot of research around that. It's
Mm.
not to say that they don't have the ability to be great at leading it, and they're not visionary, but in general, men have a harder time with change. They tend to be a bit more left brain, much more systems and process focused, and they can, to their credit, see obstacles down the road, perhaps from an
Mhm.
operational standpoint, for example, that are going to present challenges. So in general, that's what I would say. That's what I would say. But
What
there
are
are a
your
lot of great
responses?
male leaders around, that's for sure.
Thank you for that. Well, let's look at some of these obstacles that people have put up here.
This
Not
is
willing to
great.
give up the comfort zone, overlooking the input of key players, wobbly leadership, not people not understanding the reason. I think you've had conversations with me about each one of these things as problems in
We
the past.
have, haven't we? And we've been involved with clients who have faced all of these challenges. I'm just looking at them quickly. Senior leadership overlooking the input of the key players, particularly, I would say, people on the line who are experiencing and working the business model every day. This issue of, not being able to understand the rationale for change in the first instance is a really big one. It's a really big one. And the what is so important from the standpoint of a change master is that you, right from the get-go, are able to put yourself in the shoes of doubters, especially,
Mhm.
and really be authentically committed to understanding where they're coming from. And once you can get a dialogue like that going, where you're asking what if questions between each other, you slowly build trust, and you slowly get to a shared understanding of what a change should look like? What's the best thing we can do as a team member to help the change process run more smoothly and be more effective and successful? Um, if you're in a leadership role, it is to let your team members, empower your team members to go do what they do best. If you are a team member, it's to take the opportunity to um, learn and grow, ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to take measured risks when you're executing.
So
Focusing on
one of the comments here, my own preordained misconceptions. Uh, have you been involved in situations, Lynn, where you start a process and as you said, you've got a hypothesis, you're starting to engage people, and all of a sudden new information comes to the table. Um, and you know, that's a misperception of what the environment is or what the dynamic is to affect the change. How do you overcome that? Is it you know,
well,
I agree with
first
this
of all, you
concept for
have to
open
accept it.
communications, but you probably need more than that, right?
First of all, you have to accept it, Scott. When you get new information, especially information that would affect how you're thinking, and most, not most, but oftentimes people will be so dead set on a direction, and I mean a direction that has to do with a big change, that they have difficulty, just like team members, seeing what's really going on. And as a change master, you almost have to be prepared for the fact that what your original thinking is going to get modified as you socialize the thinking, as people start to get increasingly aligned on where the problems are, and increasingly aligned on what the end state really does need to be. So it tends to be a very iterative process in the beginning, and messy. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I want to address this last comment, weaker wavering commitment from the top. I would imagine if the CEO and the chairman of the board are sort of like wishy-washy on what we're trying to do, there's not that would tend to have a ripple effect downstream, I would think, that you know, maybe this new strategic plan isn't all that brilliant or cemented. And then why should I, if they're showing some signs of vacillation, why should I commit 100%?
So what's interesting about change masters are, first of all, they tend to be really laser focused, and they they're very impassioned, as I said, about when a change needs to occur. Now, having said that, the a number one thing, a number one priority when you're in the beginning of trying to socialize a change is going to be with decision makers. It's
Mhm.
going to it has to be with decision makers, but it not just decision makers though. It's not just the people from the top. When you can start to build a cadre of people in the organization who can become passionate champions and really get their heads around the rationale for the change, that helps a lot in terms of helping the leadership to have the courage of their conviction to go do it. The other thing that helps a lot is the numbers. I mean, when you can show that a particular change is going to have the following business and financial impacts on our organization with a fair amount of conviction, that goes a long way, especially at the board level, but also in the C-suite.
So the last item, I'm going to flip to our Q and answer page here, which is, I think this is addressed to you, Lynn, specifically. What's been the most difficult change process you've been involved with? And then how did you overcome those obstacles?
Oh, wow. I would say uh, the most challenging change initiative that I was involved in leading had to do with a situation where we were integrating, as a result of an acquisition, we were integrating two businesses that had, frankly, different distribution models. They were in the same business but sold their products differently. Therefore, the cultures of those two organizations were very different, were very, very different. On the other hand, there was a huge opportunity for us to do a lot of synergizing and consolidation that was non-customer facing,
Hmm.
that didn't involve the selling and marketing part of it. But the challenge in getting the two cultures to align on values and cultural norms and how we were going to work together and that kind of thing was huge. And so it was in terms of how I dealt with it, it really was it was a lot of networking, one person at a time, getting into the shoes of the people who were most threatened and really not threatening them, building trust with them, finding opportunities to make commitments to them that I could deliver on, that would help them to believe in the possibility, things like that, things like that. The relationship building is so important.
So I've got a question for you, and
Okay.
it's a bit of a departure from what I would call organizational change, which I think of typically as a way to increase productivity and gain greater efficiency and efficacy. Um, but right now, all of us in this industry are dealing with the impact of artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
So if I can get an application that can scan my emails and read the letters that I've written or the proposals I've written over time, and a donor makes a gift, and the AI system generates a thank you letter, quote,
Right.
in my voice, but it's automated, right? And it says, Dear Lynn, thank you for your gift of $1,500, blah, 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 blah. To what degree, if I'm trying to impart personality, personalization, and the degree of significance and importance that your recurring gift has to our organization, um, to what degree should I be penning my own letter versus letting the machine do it and thinking of it as basically a thank you card that I would buy from Hallmark and then signing my name? To what degree do
That's a
we
great question.
allow AI to overtake a methodology versus perhaps influence it as a proofreader, or here's an option, and then Scott, it's your job to personalize this because of your relationship with Lynn, and you refer to the dinner you had 2 weeks ago, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, actually, Scott, is that um, so I've been using AI a lot for a lot of research that I've been doing. And I haven't used it in this particular context, but I would tell you that it there's nothing like a personal touch when you are thanking someone, when you are proposing a solution to a problem. And what AI can offer, I think, is a lot of the sort of ideas and context for how to tee up a thank you or a request, for example.
Mhm.
Um, I and I think that in and of itself does create efficiencies, makes you more effective and more efficient, makes you more effective and efficient. but I would come down on the side, err on the side of making sure that a personal outreach is in order, some way, in some way,
Mm.
when you're thanking and requesting, especially when you're requesting something for yourself.
So, Lynn, I really appreciate your time this afternoon, and wanted to give you an opportunity if you had to summarize for anyone who's participating in the session, um, if they're going to embark on a change management course, what are maybe the three things you would want to have them top of mind before we part?
Number one, be as clear as you possibly can about the nature and rationale of the change. Number two, have a preliminary understanding of who your stakeholders are across the enterprise. And number three, have the courage of your conviction to go for it.
I like that. That's strong. That's strong. Well, I want to say thank you, Lynn, and I want to say thank you to the people that have joined us this afternoon. Give us a day or so to get this recording and the slide deck posted both to our Visionary YouTube channel and a link at the Visionary Philanthropy website. If you've got any interest in strategic planning, change management, or C-suite counseling, Lynn does a great job as an executive listener, confidant, and I was going to say father confessor, but maybe it's Mother Teresa confessor. Things that a newly hired CEO might want to whisper to somebody who's not an employee or on the board of the organization. Keep that in confidence and get some good feedback. Lynn does a lot of that CEO coaching with us and is terrific at it. You can reach out to her. You can reach out to us. You can give us a call. You can visit the website. We'd be delighted to engage in conversation with you and to help in any way possible. And with that, we'll sign off and see you all in March. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you all for attending. It was a delight to spend time with you and for the great questions.
They were good. Good group of people. Hey, take care and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.